Hi guys, my name is Omar. Welcome to another awesome SVGs tutorial. I know it's been a long time since my last video. I've been doing character commissions for some crafty people and it's been a great experience. But now back to the project at hand. I call this a faux snow globe hexagonal pop-up Christmas card. It is a very fun card. It has a lot of die cuts, the house, a couple of trees, a fence, and the faux snow globe sphere that you will finish with acetate or a vellum. And I will show you how to do that. The card can be pressed and laid flat so you can put it inside an envelope and send it through the mail. And it also serves as an embellishment or an ornament. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is prepare your file. Whether you downloaded the English or the Spanish version, the preparation of the file to be cut and scored is the same. So select your file and load it in design space. And as you can see, there are 5 layers to this file. The first 2 layers are the score lines and the cut lines for the card itself. The third one is the reinforcement for the sphere of the snow globe. The fourth one is the acetate layer, and the fifth one are the panels for the embellishments. So the first thing you're going to do is click on that scissors icon of the first layer and change the layer attributes to score. Now you need to attach those score lines to the cut lines. So for that, select the whole thing and click on Ungroup. And then select the first 2 layers, that is the score lines and the cut lines for the card, and go to the bottom of that panel to the right and click on Attach. That way your score lines will be attached to your cut lines. And as you can see, if you move one, the other one moves with it. If you click on Make It, you will see that your score lines are attached to the cut lines on the same mat. And I designed this card to be cut from a single piece of 8.5 by 12 piece of paper. That is what's called a folio size of paper in Chile, which is where I'm from. Now regarding the scoring lines, I used a Cricut maker and a scoring wheel. The paper I used is 240 grams per square meter paper. That is about 90-pound cardstock. And the single scoring wheel is more than enough for that type of cardstock. If you do use a Cricut Explorer or a Cricut Air, you can use a scoring stylus, but it's also a good idea to rescore the lines using a scoring buddy or some kind of scoring tool. Now once you have all your pieces cut, you will first need to remove any pieces that might have stayed in the cardstock when cutting. So take your tweezers or some fine point tool and remove any of the pieces that might have stayed there. Now I'm using a glass mat. This is the tonic glass mat. It's a great mat. As you can see here, a piece of cardstock did not cut well on my machine, so I just used an X-Acto knife right on top of that glass mat. It's a great tool. I just purchased it, and if you want to get it, the link is on the video description below. Now here are all your pieces. The card base, this is the sphere reinforcement, and these are all your embellishments. The Santa with the reindeer, and for these intricate pieces, as you can see, the cardstock kind of lifts around those small details. And so what you are going to do is flatten those cuts. For that, I use my embossing machine. I use a Cut-A-Bug, and the sandwich I use for this is number 1, the A plate. Then you will put your B plate on top. Then you will use an embossing mat. This is just a piece of rubber. Then you will put your cutouts with the front side of the cutout facing down on the embossing mat. For this card, I used texture cardstock, so make sure the texture of the cardstock is facing the embossing mat first. Then take your B plate and put it on top and run it through your die cut machine. I'm using a Cuttlebug. If you're using any other embossing machine, please let us know in the comments below the sandwich or the combination plates that you used. Now run it through your embossing machine, take your B plate and flip all the die cuts so the front of the cutout is facing up towards or is facing the B plate that you will put on top. So you will run it twice, once facing down and once facing up. So put your B plate on top, run it through your die cut machine, and remove your B plate. And now your cutouts are all flattened. As you can see, most of the of those corners and the edges of the cutout are flattened, and your cutouts look a lot neater. The good thing about this is that the cardstock doesn't lose the texture on top. So it's a great technique to use. Do the same for the other two pieces, for the fence and the sphere of the snow globe. One's facing down and then again facing up. Now I really wanted the front, the reindeer in the front to be Rudolph, so I used a Nouveau drops, the Nouveau crystal drops and red berry to apply just a little bit or a dot of Nouveau drop to the nose of the reindeer. The reindeer also has a more prominent rounded nose, so it's great to apply that Nouveau drop and add that extra touch. And I think it looks great, and you know, just a touch of red on the card. Now prepare your card bases. The first thing you're going to do is glue the embellishment panels. The file has all the panels cut from a single row. You can use pattern paper, you can use just metallic cardstock, whatever you have, just to embellish the body of the card. As you know, I like to use a liquid glue. This is Aleene's tacky glue. The glue pen allows to apply a very controlled amount of glue. It dries very fast, and it dries harder, and it reinforces the cardstock, so the mechanism will work better if you use this kind of glue. So glue all your panels to the card base. Once you have all your panels glued, it's a good idea to use an acrylic block so they dry flat. So put something flat on top and let them dry for a couple of minutes. Next, prepare your card body, folding the scoring lines that your machine did. If you used a Cricut Explorer or a Cricut Air and a scoring stylus, remember that the lines won't be as noticeable. So it's always a good idea to use a bone folder and maybe even rescore the lines using a score board or some kind of scoring tool. Now, when folding the card body, you will see that there are two scoring lines that are very close together. This will form a sort of a ridge on the edge of the card that allows for the racing panel of the card to be kind of recessed on the top of the card. That makes it look more like a snow globe, I guess. So I did that ridge that you will need to fold and glue together. So fold also the side panels and make those creases very sharp using your bone folder. Make sure everything is aligned, that the bottom and top edge of the side panel aligns with the top and bottom scoring lines also. Now you will glue that ridge I was talking about using your glue. So just apply glue to that flap right there. And here's one of my tips when I'm gluing. I kind of spread the glue using my finger, and I always keep a piece of cloth to clean my finger. Now fold that ridge and make sure not to fold the top flap or that top side of the card body, I like to use a clip binder, a binder clip. Is it a clip binder or a binder clip? Whatever. To hold it in place so you don't have to wait too long for the glue to dry. And in the meantime, start folding the front side of the card body. So use your bone folder and make all those creases very sharp. If you make those creases sharp, it will help later to the mechanism of the card, and your card will move better. So make sure to score those lines very well. Here's the ridge on the top edge I was talking about. And as you can see, the front side of the card base has a slit towards the fold on the top flap. Now fold the bottom and the gluing tab on the bottom, and also fold the side gluing tabs and the side panel. Apply glue to the top ridge, remove any excess with your finger, clean your finger on your cloth, and using a clip binder or binder clip, whatever the name is, hold it in place and allow it to dry for a couple of minutes. Now make sure the top flap does not fold down, so it's not glued to the card body. Now for the embellishment or the panel of the snow globe, I tried using acetate at first, and I tried also embossing the acetate using an embossing folder. It gives a great look, but the bad thing about it is that the acetate kind of warps, so you will need to use a very strong glue and a very strong or thick cardstock to keep it flat. I tried flatten it with my plates on my embossing machine, but it didn't really work, so I wouldn't use this technique for the acetate part of this card. Instead, I then stamped the acetate, and I think that worked a lot better. Now for stamping on acetate, I would recommend a specific inks. In this case, I used SVGs opaque, I think it's called cotton white. It's a solvent ink that is great for plastic surfaces like the acetate. A good option is also the SVGs metallic, and the Versamagic Cloud White ink also could work, but I'm afraid that could kind of peel off later. So just try using a solvent ink like the SVGs inks. Now I used the Memento ink just to mark where I was going to stamp on my Misty stamping tool. So that is just for reference, and I'll show you now how to do that. Because I was making several cards, I decided to use my Misty stamping tool. So take your piece of acetate and clean it very well. It's a good idea to use a dusting cloth so you remove any dust from the surface of the acetate. Then place the acetate on top of your the drawing pad of your stamping tool. Draw a circle around so you remember the position that your acetate was in when you stamped. And I also decided to draw a top and bottom lines for references that you will then transfer to your acetate just for positioning references. So for drawing the lines on the acetate, use a Sharpie or some kind of permanent ink marker and just draw a small dot where those lines are, just so you remember what side or the position that you put your acetate on your stamping tool. Now the stamp set I used is the Inkado's Kitschy Flourishes. It's a stamp set with a lot of curls and swirls that look great and give that kind of snow globe effect I was going for. I arranged them following the edges of the acetate to kind of form a circular pattern that resembles the way the snow moves inside the snow globes. So once you have your stamps arranged, close the door of your stamping tool to pick up your stamps, open the door up, and remove the acetate from the stamping tool. I then used a dye ink. This is Memento Tuxedo Black. You can use any colored ink that you want to stamp on top of that paper pad, so you see where your stamps are landing once you have your acetate on. So just apply a small amount of ink, close the door of your Misty, and as you can see, the impression that the ink did is not that well. It doesn't really matter. You only need that to see where your stamps are landing. Then clean your stamp very well and put your acetate on top, and this is how it's going to look. Put your magnets to hold your acetate in place, and then ink up your stamps using your StazOn opaque white ink. These inks tend to dry very fast. They come with a re-inker, so just apply a small amount of ink on top of that ink pad and distribute it using the palette that comes with it. Ink up your stamp, close the door of your stamping tool, and stamp on top of that acetate. Do not press that ink too hard, because the ink could go in between the crevices of that stamp, and it could not leave a very good impression. So do not press too hard, just press hard enough so the stamp makes a good impression on that acetate. Be very careful when picking up that acetate. The solvent ink is very unforgiving if you touch it before it dries. So put it aside and make sure it doesn't touch anything, and leave it to dry for at least 3 or 4 hours. I left them overnight drying to make sure they were completely dry. So do the same for all your acetate pieces. Remember to transfer the top and bottom marks, so you remember the position of the acetate on your stamping tool. Re-ink your stamp and close the door of your stamping tool, and press the stamp onto the acetate to transfer the design. Now, when using solvent inks, it's a good idea to clean your stamps every 3 or 4 impressions, because the ink tends to build up on the stamp and then transfers to the paper, or the acetate. So just make sure to clean your stamps every so often. Now, I also wanted to try something different. So for another card, I used a vellum. This is a 90-gram vellum. And I didn't want the design to be white, so I decided to use a different kind of ink. So I used a Versamark ink. This is a very sticky ink that also takes a long time to dry. I would also leave it for a couple of hours before touching the vellum. This gives kind of like a watermark effect on your vellum. The good thing about this ink is that it's not very wet, so it doesn't warp your vellum. Just ink up your stamp. Do not put a lot of ink on top of it. And then close the door of your Misty. Press your stamp very well so the design transfers to your vellum. And there you go. Leave it aside to dry for a couple of hours, and then keep working on your card. Now, once your vellum or acetate pieces are completely dry, start assembling the sphere of the snow globe. As you can see, the acetate and the vellum are completely flat. The ink does not warp any of them. Now, it's a good idea to use a glue that is not water-based for this. Vellum tends to warp when using a wet adhesive. So this PVA-C glue, which is called Yoo-hoo, is great for this purpose. Just make sure to get a glue that has an applicator or a tip, and you can apply it in small amounts. I'm using this twist tip glue or this twist tip container to apply just a very small amount of glue on the edge of the sphere. Next, take your vellum or acetate piece and lay it on top. aligning the edges. Give it a slight press on the edges. Make sure you have no glue on your fingers so you don't smudge the vellum, and let it dry for a couple of seconds, and then keep working with your reinforcement piece. This piece was cut from Nina 110 pound cardstock. It's a good idea to use a very, very thick cardstock for this. The sphere of the card must stand up. So if you use a not so strong cardstock, it might bend when activating the mechanism of the card. So use a very small amount of glue. I always like to use my tweezers just to see where I'm putting things on, and align the edges of the reinforcement piece with the edges of your sphere, and you're pretty much done. Remember to use the acrylic block. It's a good idea to use that acrylic block to allow it to dry flat. Next, we will start assembling the layers of the card. So take all the scene pieces, the trees, the fence, and the house. And as you can see, there are scoring lines on all of them. Those are the gluing tabs. So the ones in the front, that is the pine tree and the fence, must be folded to the back. And the layers on the back must be folded to the front. So keeping in mind that the pine tree is to the left of the card, fold that gluing tab to the back and use that bone folder to crease that fold very well. Do the same for the fence. If you don't know what the front of the cardstock is, just take a look at the texture of the cardstock. Now the embellishments on the back must have the gluing tabs folded to the front. I guess that makes sense. That is the front, and the gluing tab is folded to the back on the pine and the fence. We will start assembling the back side of the card body. The back side is the one that doesn't have a slot on that fold that you see there. So take your embellishments, your house first, that you will feed through the slot on the back of the piece. Feed it through and pull it down until the sides of that house touch the cardstock on the base. Pull it down very well, hold it there, lift up the gluing tab, and add some glue to that gluing tab. Remember, push it down and make sure it's aligned with the horizontal lines that you see on the other tabs. So add small amount of glue, remove the excess with your finger. Here's your cleaning cloth that you keep on the side, and then push the gluing tab down and remove any excess. Hold it there for a couple of seconds until it's dry, and then feed the second embellishment through. That is the rounded tree. Make sure you pull it down until the sides of that tree touch the platform on top, and the bottom edge of that gluing tab is aligned with the bottom edge of that side that you see right there. Now lift the gluing tab, add just a small amount of glue with your glue pen. Remove the excess with your finger, clean your finger on your cleaning cloth, and fold the tab down. Hold it there for a couple of seconds until the glue dries. Remove any excess and clean your fingers very well on your cleaning cloth. And this is the most important part that will make your card work. Leave it to dry for a couple of seconds. I'm using a Lean's tacky glue pen. This glue dries very fast. So then you will pull the top and the bottom platforms up, and just kind of wiggle it a little bit until everything falls in place. and that your embellishments lay flat on top or next to the platforms. Put the acrylic block on top to let it dry flat, and start working on the front side of the card body. Remove that binder clip. The front side is the one that has that slot right there where the sphere of the snow globe goes. But we will start adding the fence and the pine tree first. So here you can see the texture of the cardstock is facing the camera. And what we're going to do is put the right side of the cardstock facing down on the card base. So we will put it facing down, and we will do the same thing that we did with the back side. You will take that fence and pull it down until the sides of that fence touch the platform, the top platform. Pull it down, make sure the edges are aligned with the other horizontal edges. Just add a small amount of glue to that gluing tab. Remove the excess with your finger. Clean your finger very well of all the excess glue. That's why it's a good idea to have that cleaning cloth on the side. Press it down very well for a couple of seconds. This is, I'm showing this in real time, so you see that this glue dries very fast. It takes only a couple of seconds for it to dry. And then you will put the pine tree. Here is the front side of the cardstock, and feed it through the slot facing down. Do the same. Pull it through all the way through until the sides touch the top flat platform. Pull that gluing tab down. Align it to the horizontal pieces of the card. And then again, add a small amount of glue to the gluing tab. Using your fingers, remove the excess glue. Clean your finger and press that tab down against the bottom platform of the card body. Remove any excess glue, let it dry for a couple of seconds. And then work on your snow globe sphere. Don't forget to add your Santa and reindeer to that sphere. Then again, we will use a PVA-C glue to avoid using a water-based glue that could warp the vellum or that could not stick very well to the acetate in case of you're using acetate. So just apply a small dab of glue here and there. I always like to use my tweezers so I see where I'm putting everything. And then just give it a light press against the vellum. And let it dry for a couple of seconds. And now it's time to add this faux sphere to the card base. So just feed the bottom of the sphere through that slot and the center of that top platform. Keep in mind that the reinforcement piece of that sphere must also go inside that slot. And make sure you pull it through until the bottom edge of that sphere almost touches the bottom edge and the gluing tab of that bottom platform. So just align it, make sure everything is aligned and it's almost touching. If it doesn't touch it, just pull it through a little bit more and just add a small amount of glue. Make sure no glue goes inside that crease. Remove the excess with your finger. Clean your finger on your cleaning cloth and fold that tab up and let it dry for a couple of seconds. You can also use your binder clips here to hold it in place, but this glue dries very fast, so I don't think it's necessary for this to use them. Now, once that is dry, you will also add a small amount of glue to the top flap that you see right there. It is very important that you do this, otherwise the mechanism and the top platform will not rise when you activate the card. So just add a small amount of glue, remove the excess with your fingers, or your finger. You can use only one if you want to. Sorry, sometimes my English is not that good. Fold that gluing tab down and adhere it to the reinforcement piece of the sphere. Remember, this part is very important. This is what activates the mechanism. So you will need to do this very carefully and make sure it's glued correctly. Now let it dry for a couple of seconds, and then we will fold everything up. As you can see, everything is moving very well, and you will need to kind of wiggle it a little bit so it lays flat, and pull everything up. This is what gets the mechanism working. It's always good to do this before assembling the front and back parts of the card. That way your card will move better. So you would now need to add a small amount of glue to that gluing tab on the center of the card and align it to the gluing tab on the back side of the card base. Align the corners, hold them together for a couple of seconds and give it a good press. Just pass your fingers through the cutouts, the trees in the house, and give it a good press until they are completely adhered. You can also use your bone folder to kind of press in the center behind that tree and that house. So just make sure everything is aligned. The top edges are aligned and the bottom edges of the card body are aligned also. So everything is nice and straight. Then you will work your card towards the bottom. So just press that snow globe and bring those bottom platform pieces towards the bottom edge of the card. And there you go, kind of wiggle it so everything falls into place. Add some glue to that gluing tab and press it together. Now at this point, both of edges should be aligned. So just fold that flap out and add a little bit of glue. Remove the excess with your finger. Clean up your finger on your cleaning cloth and press all the gluing tabs together. Now at this point you will have to excuse me. I realized later that my camera stopped recording, so I had to grab another card that I had made. Unfortunately, this card, besides it being in Spanish, does not have the same pattern paper that I used on my original tutorial card. But anyways, this will do. Next, after gluing the bottom gluing tabs, you will need to glue the side tabs. So for this, pull out the tab, the side tab, add a little bit of glue with your glue pen, remove the excess with your finger and clean your finger on your cleaning cloth, and then press the gluing tab against the side piece of the card body. Hold it there for a couple of seconds, allowing for the glue to dry a little bit, and then repeat the process on the opposite side. For this card, it's already glued, but the main thing is that you will need to avoid gluing the gluing tab to the sphere of the snow globe. That is very important. Once you glue the sides, you will need to work your card or activate the card a couple of times so you make sure the card works properly. So press it on the sides, open and close it a couple of times, and then you're ready to mail this card. Now remember, there is a Spanish and an English version of the card. There is also a QR code that I included on the card that if you scan it will take you to a video that shows how to activate the card. This is a very fun project. I hope you like it. Remember that the link to my blog post is in the video description below. And don't forget to visit the blog for more pictures and information. Remember that the products I use are linked in the video description below. They are also linked on my blog post. And if you like this project and this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Have a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year.